Mike. It's a pleasure to be here, and we've been asked to share some of the secrets of our success, putting shared decision-making into practice. And so the first secret of our success that I really want to acknowledge is, under the disclosure of our current funding sources, the foundation, of course. So having a funding partner that's been willing to invest in making us a demonstration project, that's really been a fantastic ingredient to our success. And then the other, in the top, I have a link actually to the many acknowledgments that I'd like to make. I'll highlight one real secret and champion, and that is the director of the Breast Care Center. It's thanks to Laura Esserman that we have a director of decision services. And in fact, my relationship with Laura goes back to being a graduate student at Stanford in the School of Engineering. And healthcare was really not in my field of vision for a career. And Laura Esserman said, you know, we need more thinking, more of this engineering type of thinking in healthcare. And so she got not just me, but Karen Sapuka and Alyssa Ozan, and I like to think of us as kind of a generation of people involved in this field, and it's been very rewarding. So I'm very grateful to her as well. So there are other secrets that we want to share with you, and I'm going to build some of the suspense and lay the foundation, tell you a bit of the backstory. And then Alexandra is going to give you some details from the front lines. And then I'm going to come back with some plot reversals and twists and share some secrets behind the secrets. But I want to start with something that's really not a secret at all, which is that the patient journey through medical decisions and through specialty care decisions especially, and especially through cancer decisions, is very complex. And often the journey in terms of decision-making, certainly treatment decision-making, begins after this diagnosis, a frightening diagnosis of cancer. You have cancer, you see a pathology report, invasive infiltrating carcinoma. This is a very frightening time for people, and your emotions become engaged, and all the fears of mortality get engaged. So after, or while you're dealing with that shock, you're then propelled into what I call the visit cycle, which is a cycle of visits to specialists. And these people are really dedicated and really trying to help you. And they include, in the case of breast cancer, you're going to see surgeons or a surgeon, plastic surgeon, radiation oncologist, medical oncologist. And at each visit, you're going to hear about treatment options. And some of those options are also invasive and frightening: surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, sometimes referred to as slash, burn, and poison. So it's in this context that we're asking patients to be informed and involved. And it's a lot to ask. So I want to just recognize that shared decision-making in this context is a challenging thing for patients. Luckily, there are proven strategies to get people informed and involved. And they start with, as Mike was saying earlier, decision aids, packaging information about alternatives and their outcomes into materials that reflect Gerd Gigerenzer's and others' work on how you communicate risks and how you incorporate patient testimonials and viewpoints. There are other strategies too. A part of the visit cycle when you're going through and seeing your surgeon is that you may wait weeks and worry for weeks before going in to see somebody who's very busy, and that's very obvious to you. And then you may freeze up. This is a very common phenomenon. You may freeze up and not be able to ask or forget to ask the questions that you came in with. So researchers have studied the simple intervention of helping people make a list of questions. People who make a list of questions are more likely to ask the questions and cover a broader range of topics. Very simple and powerful intervention. And then if you do ask the questions, there's also the phenomenon of having the answers go in one ear and out the other. It's a very complex topic, cancer, and the treatments are complex, and the time is short. So actually, researchers have also studied giving patients recordings, audio recordings of each visit, and patient-oriented summaries, not the dictated chart, which is dictated for professionals and reimbursement and medical legal purposes, but something that's really patient-oriented. So these are three strategies that are really important for informing and involving patients. And this is a picture now of the patient journey with those strategies sprinkled in, along with some of the other strategies that are important. For example, getting people access to specialty care, navigating them through barriers and getting them to specialty care. and then providing emotional and psychosocial support to sort of stabilize the emotions so that you can deal with the cognitive issues around making choices in cancer. But then having a sequence of reviewing decision aids, listing questions, and providing, making notes and audio recordings. And at the same time, this is still a lot of work. So particularly for people with cancer, they want to be taken care of. So how do we integrate these interventions into the patient journey without increasing the burden on people who are already in a very vulnerable and difficult time? And this is where I think I want to explain the secret behind our success, or maybe I should say the secret agents behind our success. So these are shared decision-making secret agents. They're pre-medical trainees in our program. And you can see in the corners, Shelley Voles and myself supervise these young people. They are college graduates who are spending a so-called gap year or two before going on to medical school or other professional training. And the way the program works is that there's several moving parts. Laura Esserman, the director of our breast care center, has found research projects and other kinds of projects around the breast care center that really need assistance, the assistance of young, motivated, hardworking program assistants. And so Laura and I go out and we find the top 10 college graduates every year who have the best aptitude for scientific research and also the combination of interpersonal skills. And we recruit these people, and we train them, we hire them, we train them, and we oversee them. And in exchange, we put them to work on the various faculty projects around the breast care center. And in exchange, all we ask is that the faculty lend them back to us for a day a week so that they can accompany patients on their journeys and provide decision support and connect patients with decision aids and help them with making a list of questions and make audio recordings and take notes. So Alexandra is now going to tell you a little more in detail about how that works.
Hi, thanks. As Jeff mentioned, my name's Alexandra Teng, and I am one of the pre-meds. It's really been truly amazing how effective we can be in helping patients get informed and involved in their care without even having medical degrees. I want to explain to you how we do that. Basically, the 9 other pre-meds and I split coverage of the clinics so that we make sure we call all new patients coming into the breast care center to offer them decision aids and our services. So to kind of paint you a better picture, I'll tell you about a recent case I did with a patient we'll call Anna. Anna made an appointment at the breast care center to see an oncologist, and then so her appointment showed up on my call list, and I called her to offer her the decision aid. We have topics that vary all the way from pre-cancer surgery options through metastatic disease. So part of my job is to get the right materials to the right patient at the right time. So Anna and I figured out that the hormone therapy and chemotherapy video was going to be best for her. So I sent it to her and encouraged her to begin thinking about questions that might be specific to her situation. After she had a chance to review them, I got to talk to her on the phone, and we got to delve into her questions and concerns, which I organized into something we call the scoped framework. So if you pull out your handout in your folder that starts with this Wall Street Journal article and flip to the second page, you'll see the list of questions that Anna and I came up with. And you see the scoped categories are situation, choices, objectives, people, evaluation, and decisions. And for example, under objectives, you can see that Anna and I wrote down her preference of, I like being told the facts and details. I like facts, numbers, charts. This is an example of something that came up in our discussion that made communication between her and her physician more effective that might not have come up otherwise. So the day of her appointment, I was there with Anna, and I had emailed her question list beforehand to the doctor so he could look at it as well. And I went with her to take notes on a laptop, and I brought a little recorder like this one to record the discussion for her. That way, at the end of her appointment, I was able to send her home with a copy of my notes and a CD with a recording of the discussion. At the end of all these services, Anna sent me an email, and I wanted to share a little bit of it with you. She wrote to me, I cannot imagine having my questions, fears, and concerns being addressed and answered if it wasn't for you. You're going to be a wonderful, caring doctor in the future. Serving patients like Anna is really the highlight of each week for me. It has been a major part of not only my decision to go to medical school, but also my motivations to become a certain type of doctor. I think all pre-medical students are looking for patient exposure, but I think being a shared decision-making secret agent in a program like this is more than that. We shadow not doctors, but patients. We get to see things through the patient's eyes, and we learn that to do what's best for the patient is actually to empower them to realize their own questions and concerns and help incorporate that into their care. So now that I've had the chance to be fully immersed in patient questions and concerns, I know how I can help find the care that will fit a patient's whole life. So if you take a second to look at some of my colleagues' reflections on our experiences, you'll see that I'm not alone in how I feel, and I think that we're all going to be impacted forever in the experiences we've had as we become healthcare professionals. So I'll let you read those and hand it back over to Jeff.
Indeed, you can imagine how proud I am to hear Alexandra, really help me reshape my whole conception of what I do, which is that I am the guy who trains pre-meds to shadow patients, not doctors. I think that's a very powerful way of looking at this experience. And so I do want to get into a discussion of this program. We've now had 37 of these young people go through our program. And as Alexandra mentioned, they are going on through their medical training, and they're going on to very distinguished schools of medicine and public health, and they are really on a trajectory now into healthcare, and it makes me feel great that my children, your children, our grandchildren will be getting care from people who have had this experience of shadowing patients, not doctors. And I asked our first pre-med intern. The program has been growing over the years, and when Brian was here, he was the only pre-med doing this kind of decision support. And I asked him to email me some of his reflections. So I'll just read to you. Now he's in third year of residency at Harvard, and he writes, "My experience has significantly impacted how I approach my interactions with patients. I elicit patient preferences, wishes, and fears in order to make the treatment plan a true collaboration between patient and doctor. This approach to the patient-physician relationship makes the hospital course a lot smoother because the patient feels like a partner in care rather than the recipient of care. Also, there's no doubt in my mind that when you take the extra few minutes to elicit a patient's hopes, fears, and goals at the beginning of the care process, you save extraordinary time in the long run because you don't have to deal with the miscommunications and misunderstandings that may have come up later." So we also have 4 surgeons, attending physicians, and 8 oncologists who cooperate and coordinate and collaborate with our program in the Breast Care Center. And they really echo Brian's statement that there's benefits here for the doctor as well as the patients in terms of shared decision making. So I'll read to you what Michelle Malisco, these quotes are also in the handout we gave you from our program. Dr. Malisco says, "The decision services really help define how much a patient already knows and what is important to them. The patients coming in having viewed the videos are definitely more prepared for their visit with me and definitely ask better questions, questions that are going to use my time better. And I'm able to start from a higher level of explanation than with people who haven't watched the videos." So the pre-meds benefit from this experience and the doctors benefit. But of course, the real impact we're looking for is on patients. And so I just want to review some of our evaluations with, for example, right here, the decision aids. We surveyed during a 3-year period 1,000 patients or so, and got back responses that really confirm the experience of the randomized controlled trials. For example, in terms of knowledge, a huge knowledge gain, enormous satisfaction, and almost universal endorsement of the decision aids from the patient perspective. And then more recently, we also wanted to know, are patients really reviewing these decision aids? There's been some question about to what extent are they actually using the materials. And again, we found very high percentages reviewing the videos and even more using the booklets. So I think that another reason that the decision aids are so well adopted by patients is that they're really integrated into a process of care with the pre-medical trainees. And so, as you heard Alexandra describe, she'll talk to a patient and say, I'm sending you a decision aid, I want you to watch it, and then I'm going to call you back, and we're going to develop a list of questions. And by the way, while you're watching the decision aid, write down your questions and email them to me, and then we'll work through a checklist. And so that whole process makes the decision aid not some kind of parallel, adjunct to care, but really integrated into the process of care. And so, as you can see here, with the pre-medical trainees' help, the patients are thinking of more questions that otherwise might have been overlooked and might have had to come back later. And they're using the documents we produce. So remember that the patient leaves at the end of each appointment with the list of questions that they wrote down and also a summary of notes, like the example that's in your handouts, and then a CD audio recording. And they're actually reviewing these materials and using them. And a little later today, Mary Bianchi is here, who is one of our patients who experienced these services, and she'll be on a panel to describe a little bit her impact, or the impact of these things on her care. So we also ask our patients to rate our physicians on their shared decision-making behaviors. And you can see there's almost universal agreement that our doctors are doing a great job making the patient feel included and involved in the care. There is room for improvement. We're still not answering all the questions. 81% said all their questions were answered. And there's some room for improvement. Other researchers have found that our doctors, like many other doctors, tend to talk more about the benefits of treatments than the risks and side effects. But we just take this as a challenge for continuous improvement, and I think we're moving in the right direction. So I know some of you may be thinking, well, this is what you're doing at UCSF, and what about my doctors, my patients, in my context? Is this something that really has any relevance? And I would say, yeah, it's true that we're working with some innovators and early adopters. Laura Esserman, for those of you who know her, is kind of the quintessential innovator and early adopter. And we are going to need some big levers to tip across the chasm to the early majority with shared decision making. But I want to highlight a few features. When we've been presenting this work, really the audiences have been telling us that this is an example of what Clay Christensen calls a disruptive innovation, that using trainees in this way as what I call shared decision-making secret agents, that this has some features that can be replicated in other places. For example, we're using a relatively inexpensive resource, $20, $25 an hour, to leverage the time of very expensive professionals. With a sort of a benefit on the service side for the pre-meds. So the pre-meds are able to spend an hour or two getting the decision aids to the patient and reviewing questions and helping the patient prepare, and that is really a way of leveraging the professionals. But we're doing it in a way that also doesn't overshoot the need. So our trainees are not providing medical advice or information. They're not qualified for that, but they are extremely qualified, and we train them to do certain specific tasks that facilitate shared decision-making. So we need to be mindful of using resources efficiently and not overshooting the need. That's one of the messages from the sort of theory and history of disruptive innovations. And then, of course, we're looking for the win-win-win-win, that in this kind of program, we think the patients benefit. We think the trainees benefit. They get valuable experience. The doctors are telling us they benefit from more productive consultations. And ultimately, even the faculty who lend us 20% of their resource, 20% of the pre-medical trainees also benefit, because we're now getting 100 applicants a year for 10 spots. And we're really getting the best and brightest people involved. And so they're getting fantastic productivity out of these trainees while they're working on other projects. And another principle of a disruptive innovation that I want to highlight in our program, I think, is that we're combining high touch and high tech. So we do use technology. We have the DVDs, we use email a lot, telephone, we do some of the consultations by telephone. But at the same time, it's a high touch interaction, and there's some fantastic intergenerational bonding that goes on between, breast cancer patients are in generally 40 to 70 range, and our trainees are in their young 20s. But it's just a gratifying thing to see the sort of optimism and the sense of social, I guess I would call it a pro-social kind of atmosphere that occurs when you combine these young people providing a service with a patient need. So we have, as I said, been recognized now as a leading innovation, and I do want to call for scaling this concept up. So I call this the pre-medical core. Why not, on a national scale, do this in the spirit of Teach for America or the Peace Corps, get young people, trainees, involved in delivering shared decision-making. There's a couple of opportunities regionally and even nationally that I'm working on. So Laura Esserman has put together the University of California Medical Centers in a breast care network, and we're looking, called Athena. And so we're looking at, can we do this on a regional scale in California? I'm also working with the Cancer Support Community, which is a nationwide network of resource centers, just merged the Wellness Community and Gilda's Club. And they're very intrigued by this idea and building it into their strategic plans of having trainees. And for them, it's not just pre-medical trainees, it's also trainees from nursing, from social work, from mental health. There are trainees that need practicum hours, that need the experience. So you can imagine a core of some kind, maybe it's more than a pre-medical core, that really leverages this opportunity for getting young people involved in service in exchange for experience and a stipend that in a very affordable way allows us to promote shared decision-making around the country. So I want to leave you with that thought, because really I think there are people in this audience who can help us make that happen. So please be in touch with me about this concept and this idea. And I thought I would leave the last word to one of our patients who anticipated or echoed some of the things I think we've all read in the Institute of Medicine report on quality about how this is the way medicine should work, that the information I was looking for all over the web was consolidated in a format that really made sense, the decision aids, and that the consultation was superb and everything was very proactive. So with that, we'd be happy to take questions and discussion. Thanks. Sure.
Please.
Thank you, Mike. John Berkmeyer, I'm a surgeon at the University of Michigan, and that just is a fascinating program. And I have just a couple questions for you. The first is, I wonder if you could highlight the distinctions between this very innovative program that you're running and what many are championing elsewhere on patient navigation systems. And the second is, I wonder if there are additional targets for which types, for how to recruit this this volunteer corps, and you're targeting it now at the pre-med level, but I wonder if this couldn't be part of the formal curriculum at medical schools, and medical students would actually be doing this as a formal part of their training.
Great, yeah, I'll field those questions. The navigation issue is an interesting topic. I see the nav, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Harold Freeman in Harlem started this concept of patient navigation, and a lot of the initial focus was on navigating through patients through barriers to accessing care. So I would call that sort of a logistical form of navigation. I think Harold has now expanded the concept and it's been adopted by the American Cancer Society and the NCI and others, and they're testing it and rolling it out. And then it's expanded to really navigating people through any barriers to care, to quality care. And I think this is a very relevant concept for us, that the barriers we're talking about are more cognitive and informational, but it definitely builds on work of, you got to have people having access to care in order to then provide them with decision support. And by the way, they also have to have emotional support, at least in cancer care, in order to really cope effectively. So navigation, it's a good question. I refer to our staff as facilitators, because that's the best analogy I've been able to find. Is it's kind of like when you have a really important meeting and you get a meeting facilitator involved. The role of that facilitator is going to be to help make sure you have the agenda straight and that you come prepared, and then they're going to help make sure that there's a balance of the conversation. So there's some advocacy involved in meeting facilitation. And that's really my best metaphor for, or analogy to what we're doing. But I certainly think it links to navigation. And then on the volunteer corps with medical students, absolutely, fantastic idea. The only challenge would be that the rotation be long enough. because it does take some training. We spend 3 days of training in really non-directive, supportive, active listening, and then the specific way of taking notes that we train. And it just takes some training, and then about 6 weeks of supervision and case reviews, weekly case reviews. And then we've got somebody really up to speed. So within 3 days of training and 6 weeks of weekly supervision, we're really rolling on all cylinders. So I would like to then be able to exploit that training for a few months to a year. And I'm not sure how that works with the medical curriculum right now. Perhaps a gap year during the, many medical students are taking a year off to do research, and this might be another kind of thing. I'm open. I mean, we're just getting started with this concept.
Please.
Hi, Karen Merrick, Group Health Cooperative. Well, I comment then a question. My comment is I really like what you're doing because I think you're taking your secret agents and you're placing them in medical schools all across the country, which is fabulous because I think it's going to change the nature of the discussion in classrooms. My question is, how do you think medical school admissions criteria should change so that we could get more people with the kinds of social and emotional skills you're talking about into medical schools? Thank you.
Well, I think Alexandra is in the midst of applying to medical schools. So what's your perception of what the criteria are, and how would you like to see them change?
As someone who's still working on getting in, I think that the initial cut is a lot around grades, and there are these certain hoops that you jump through. That there's the formula of research, doctor shadowing, and grades, GPA, and MCAT. And I think that some schools now that take a second look and read about my experience are the ones that are jumping up at this. And I feel like if schools look at that and make that as part of the hoops that you have to jump through, that I think that will have a much bigger impact on what kind of doctor I am and my motivations while I'm at med school. So I guess to answer your question, I think up front you should be looking for things that are more exposure to patients from this angle than just the traditional ones.
Please.
Yeah, Peter Lee, Pacific Business Group on Health. I think it's a great program, really exciting, not just because I'm from San Francisco. First, a comment. One, I want to echo the last two comments, which is part of what's so exciting about this. It's changing the culture of clinicians and how they look at becoming clinicians. I think that's really an exciting part. But as a program to replicate, you've got a great program. What have you done sort of to lay out how to make it replicable in terms of the business model? Because Clay Christian, you have a disruptive innovation because there's a market niche you're filling. So to run that out for us a little bit, how have you thought about both what this costs on a per patient basis and how you thought about running this out around the country and also for other conditions?
Okay, I think I'll field that one, and that's a longer conversation I really like to have, not just with you, but others in this room. So this, just to sketch out some early thinking, on a variable cost basis, so once you've got fixed costs taken care of and you're able to get enough patient volume that you're spreading those fixed costs out over enough people, the variable cost of having a trainee accompany someone through this journey, it might take 4 to 6 hours per visit. And that you might be able to do that for $20 an hour. So that's to me a pretty affordable way of influencing someone's trajectory very early in their journey. So I would hope that insurance companies and other payers really have already seen the economic business case for patient education and activation. The problem is that, frankly, an insurance company isn't the most credible partner. I mean, you can imagine patients feeling like, what, you're going to send someone to take note, you're getting between me and my doctor? That's not going to fly. So what I would look for is a kind of a value proposition where you find medical schools, agencies like the Cancer Support Community, foundations like this one, and you say, we're going to provide the trusted accompanier. And it doesn't just need to be trainees, it can also be peers. We've trained peer navigators, to use that phrase. So there's a lot of opportunity to get low-cost providers of this kind of support that are really trusted partners. And then I think financing it, you need to find the payers who are willing to reimburse for that at somewhat of an arm's length. so that there's no feeling that either the hospital or the insurance company is really trying to horn in on this relationship. And I think if you manage the optics of that arrangement, you can really get something that's, spending $100 or so on a course that people are going to make treatment decisions that cost tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars all told. So spending a few $100s in getting the patient on a better trajectory seems like it should be a high return on investment. So those are some of my early thoughts. I mean, in terms of, we also manualized this process. We have a 200-page policies and procedures guide. We have a 200-page reference guide for training. So we're ready to spread the model, and I think it's true. We just need to figure out the business model for it at this point.
Please.
Jeff, would you say a little more about your experience using peers as in this role?
Okay, using peers, we have worked with resource centers similar to the cancer support community, especially around Northern California, where they were started as grassroots organizations fueled by the experience of survivors. And so they have frequently created a small health library as the typical model, and then they have a small core staff, and they're supported by donations from the community, and then they will train volunteers and peers. And we have done that training and put peers into exactly this kind of model where they accompany. There's, in each model, there's different challenges with the pre-medical trainees. We're dealing with young and inexperienced people who are put into a real position of responsibility, and a lot of what we're trying to do is train them into the boundaries of the role. With peers, the challenge is that often they have so much experience, and so they want to be advocates also beyond the role, beyond the neutral kind of facilitative role that we have in mind. But both of those challenges are very manageable, and we've had great success, and I can talk to you more about that offline, perhaps.
Please.
Hi, I'm Marianne O'Sullivan and the Campaign for Effective Patient Care, and last week I got to go to Jeff's program and track a patient through a day, through a morning pre-discussion and then through the doctor hour-long visit. And she's a breast cancer patient and considering hormone therapy. And before I did this, you had talked about the importance of the tape recording, and I thought, oh, another bell and whistle sort of. But then after I sat through that hour-long appointment, and she was not going to start the hormone therapy for several months, and I thought, boy, if that was me, I'd want to go back in and listen to that tape again just before I'm starting it and really maybe revisit the decision and that sort of thing. And I was wondering what you know about how often patients do go back and listen again to the tape recordings and why you think it's so valuable.
Yeah, so first of all, when we implemented, we were translating other people's research into practice. So there are good randomized controlled studies of this question that show that patients listen on average twice to these kinds of recordings, and on average involve 2 other people in listening to them. So, and that's been borne out with our follow-up surveys, where I think I showed some of the data about how many people are, at least more are reviewing the summaries, because those summaries are kind of a good gist takeaway of what was said in fairly plain language. But still a majority are reviewing the recordings as well. So, and then anecdotally, I was telling some of the foundation staff that this year, for the first time, we sent out an annual report to our patients, because they've been so fantastic in terms of giving us survey feedback, and so we wanted to feed back some of that information. And as part of that, I asked people to be in touch, particularly if they wanted to share their stories. And I heard back from dozens of patients who said, yeah, this is specifically, and many of them mentioned the recordings. And I think Mary will tell you later about her experience with the recordings. So it's I think, an overlooked, simple technology. By the way, it has huge system benefits too, because we haven't pushed the envelope too hard on this, but the next frontier is now we want to audit those and use them as a mechanism for quality improvement. So with the patient permission, we can review with physicians what's going on behind these closed exam room doors. So in fact, I'm writing grants now to understand what are the legal implications of these recordings, and are they part of the medical record or not part of the medical record, and who's, there are complex issues around them. And we're pushing the envelope pretty hard on the use of these things, but I think there's just more and more opportunity there.